comes to me and does not, these are strong words, but we'll walk through them and get a better understanding of what he's speaking of. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father, mother, wife, children, you can put spouses in there, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. He literally saying that you cannot learn from me. If these, one of the ways you could put that word hate is that you put these above their number, that they become a number one priority. They become, well, in a sense you can also say that they become idols. And I'm going to talk about that more and more, is that one of the things I've been teaching in the last couple of weeks is how, and it's connected with everything we talk about, is that how these people, remember we always talk about people, places, and things. Well, in this instance, he's talking about people in relationships. And what can happen is that these people become idols in the sense that you begin to worship in a sense that you and I have, they become, we make them a certain image. And we use that image for existence. We use that, let me go back. I have been teaching also on the fact that within that relationship, within that family unit that he's talking about, there is in the number one priority with God was that when God created man, there's three things he did with man. Is that he created him in his image, and he gave him dominion, and he gave him destiny. And those three aspects were to be fulfilled within the family unit. They could be because as a father, as a mother, as a spouse, or even as children, within that unit, that's where we gain our sense of identity. We gain our sense of authority, and I don't mean that. See what has happened, because since the man of fall, the authority in its right perspective has changed from the right perspective to the wrong perspective of which is controlling. See, now you see people trying to gain authority by controlling another person, or even manipulating circumstances in some way, shape, or form. That's because we've been disconnected from the right aspect of authority and dominion from God, and now it's fallen apart. And so you see man now trying to gain identity, he's trying to gain authority, and he's trying to fulfill purpose or destiny on his own. Like we've talked about, there's different aspects of what man has gone to do apart from God and try to be fulfilled or remain be whole or balanced. And it's what's happening is that we see in those three areas it's falling apart. But what's gone on is that many have used those relationships in attempts to gain and maintain those three aspects we're talking about. But because they're doing it apart from God and without God, it keeps falling apart. It's not. We can see it now. Back then, especially back then, you'll see that the number one priority to the Hebrew people was family. God first, then the family. But fallen man again has tried to gain and maintain those three aspects: the identity, of the authority, and the destiny or fulfillment, without God. And so you'll see how mankind has tried to make up ideals and thoughts which lead to actions that really we were wondering, well, why is the family unit torn apart? Because that's what's gone on. Then you see it in the bigger picture with government, you see it with nations, you see it with kingdoms, because within a nation and a kingdom, you'll see that what are they attempting to do? This is why when we talked about Hitler, that was a bigger sense of what we're talking about. Our bigger picture was when we talked about Hitler and when he began to speak to the nation of Germany, the Germans in Germany, the nation, is that he began to give them they were totally impoverished. They got to the point where their government was totally collapsed, which meant it affected society, which meant it affected the people or the environment or the well, we could say the family unit. When he began to speak to them, he began to give them a sense of identity, authority, or dominion, and destiny. In fact, if you ever get a chance, I have never read it, I've heard bits and pieces of it, but within my comps, the writing that he wrote, that's what it was all about. It was about a man or a person getting back his and giving it a sense to the other people of gaining and maintaining identity, authority, and destiny. But it's falling apart. And so you see it happening within a small unit of the family, and you can see it now in our government. The American, within 200 years, it started good and great and really cool and really neat and productive. Now we're seeing it fall apart. We're seeing it, but again, even within that American society, the American culture, or even in the Constitution, you see where man came up with another idea for identity, authority, and prosperity, or purpose, or destiny. And now you see it falling apart. Now Jesus is talking to a smaller unit, and he especially began to talk to a people who had allowed these people to become in relationships in a place where it began to take precedence over the king. That's why he would always say things like, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness." And he was talking about, make that your number one priority, and the number one thing in your life is that you are going to live out the kingdom principles, and that first and foremost you know who the provider is. You know the provider's laws and principles to live life, and you live by them. Make that number one priority, because if not, then what will happen is that let me say with my notes here. You've been studying what it is to be a disciple of Christ. He had some very strong words to those who wanted to follow him. In verse 26, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father, mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters, even yes, his own life, he cannot be my disciple." But yet, now the flip side of that is like when we go to the epistles or the letters to the church, which were letters of instruction. Paul was writing stuff like the commandments was honor your mother and father. And he told the husbands to love your wives as Christ loved the church. He would tell the fathers, do not exasperate or do not provoke your children unto wrath. And that is, treating them in a way that they would become rebellious. That you're so oppressive. And see, that's that when I was talking about authority earlier, is that the authority that God given the Father as the provider. See, there's a big difference. The authority God was talking about was that person becomes the number one aspect of providing for that family, the family unit, and giving them a sense of identity, but it was linked with God. When the father taught the children, and even taught the wives, he taught from the perspective of God is our number one source. God is this, God is that. This is who God is, and this is who we are connected with Him. And so that's the authority, that He has the one as authority to operate and to function and to teach in that position as a father. And it goes with the wife and etc. But what happened, because men fell from grace or separated themselves from God, the grace of God, because the grace of God it's been around since the beginning. When He created, it was because of His grace and because of His love. So it's not a new concept. He loves. I love my creation so much. So I'm giving these things: the identity, the dominion, and the destiny, the fulfillment of life. And so we see how now, since that's been separated, man, the Father, He comes up with His own ideas, His own thoughts, His own ways of thinking. For what? For that position He's in. But because it's a fallen nature, we see the results. The first result we saw was murder. We saw how you talk about family dysfunction. I mean, the first family that was murder right there. And see, we see that it's continuing on in every culture, every race, every kingdom, however you want to say it, nation, is that the family unit is falling apart, and you'll see how the father wants it. And I take responsibility too, because the position I was given as a father, I failed miserably in a lot of different ways, and I try to live that position in many different ways that were opposite of God. So it created more dysfunction or sin. It just kept all the offenses and trespasses came with my way of thinking of how to be a father. It created more and more, we would say evil that's perishing. It's non-productive. It doesn't bring forth nothing. It just creates, because if I was to look at my son, and he'd probably agree with you, because I could say about my dad is that some way, shape, or form, I took on the thinking patterns that my father took on, thinking this is the way a father is, this is the way a husband is, this is the way you teach your children, this is the way you do all these things, and then you begin to live that out, but yet it becomes more, but it's falling apart. It's not that productive. That's why Jesus would say things like, well, apart from me, you can't do anything. Apart from me, you'll become nothing. Apart from me, you're deteriorating and rotting away. That's the opposite of what God said once He gave everybody destiny, the authority, and identity. What did He say? What did He say after that? Now be fruitful and multiply. And we think in terms of the physical sense, which yes is, that's a part of it, but in the broader sense, it is producing more after what? After the image of God. See, the Father, that whole family unit in the beginning was created after the image of God. But once that was broken, they didn't have an image to live by. Well, they did, but it was totally, again, here comes the spirit of, or the thought of, or the attitude of the Antichrist. The anti-anointing. The anti and it's opposed against God, and honestly stands in the place of God, trying to produce, trying to be that father, be the wife, be whatever it is in the family relationship, but it's falling apart. And what we've done with these, I'll touch on it just a little bit, is that we have made these false idols or false images that we pattern ourselves after. And then we take a look. I could take a look, and I noticed that too, is that I'll take that sometimes in my thought process. I've taken a little bit of my father, and I create something, but I kind of mix it with my something else. Another thought pattern that Vince may have, or ideas that are totally opposite of God. And I begin to live that out. Then it affects what? My wife, my children, my brothers, my sisters. So I have to get to a point where I'm looking at that image and saying, I can't do that no more. But anyway, first we must realize that the family unit is the first relationship in our lives that shape us and mold us. We learn from them. They shape our way of thinking, whether good or bad, whether consciously or subconsciously, or subconscious. Whether knowingly or like I have taken on some of my father's traits and his habits and his ways of thinking, his way of dealing with things. I have taken them on. And it's funny because I always said that when I looked at it when I was a child growing up and I was becoming very rebellious because of certain things in my life, I looked at my father and said, I'll never be like that. But guess what? I'm just like him. I've taken on some good and some bad, mostly bad. And I'm not blaming my father for anything. Because again, I have the power of choice. But unless I learn that I do have a choice and use that choice, and that's part of that, what we're going to be talking about when he says, yes, dying to your own life, or carrying your own cross and dying to the life that you have made, that you have brought together, that you have shaped and molded, and it's become an image. Remember we said, we do it again, consciously or subconsciously. We wear our clothes to present an image. We have a certain job or want a certain amount of money to present an image. We drive a car, or like to drive a car, to present. I like a lot of cars that I would say, man, I would look good in that puppy. But I don't have it. So we can get things. Remember, we can use people, places, and things to create images, and then we present ourselves to somebody. Or we get them and use that image that we've got, that they have given us, and we take it on and we add it to the image that we're making. That we're and this is a false image. See, we gotta get out of that whole concept of thinking it's us lighting candles to a statue, or that it's whatever it is that we can also, we don't, or worshiping the sun, or creating an image like Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar had that back in the Old Testament. He had an image, that he had this dream of an image, and he didn't know what it was, but as Daniel interpreted the dream, he gave him what it meant, and it meant that it was representing seven different nations or kingdoms that would arise. And so at first, he didn't really know how to deal with this. Nebuchadnezzar, so what did he do?